In the acknowledgement section, in the first line, first and foremost, I would like to thank God. I thank Allah for making all things possible and ask Allah to purify my intentions and accept my efforts. When I read these first lines, I just told myself, this book is gonna be special. But this book was so good that I had to buy the paper version. This book is Muslim Cool, Religion, Race, and Hip-Hop in the United States by Professor Su'ad Abdul Khabeer, published in 2016 by the New York University Press. This book argues that Islam could not have become what it has become in the United States without the contribution of Black Muslims and hip-hop. This is my favorite, an all-time favorite out of hundreds when it comes to an ethnography, anthropology or sociology of Muslims or Islam. Some people would argue that music is haram, that Black Muslim activism causes fitna and so on. So I'm going to be straight. If you think that Black Muslim activism causes fitna, then this video is not for you. If you think music is haram, well, this is a point of view I respect. People follow different religious and scholarly rulings, and even if they differ or may contradict themselves, they're still valid. And I think this is one of the beauties of Islam. But let's talk about the author, Professor Su'ad Abdul Khabeer. She is an associate professor of American culture at the University of Michigan. But she's not only an academic, she is also an artist and an activist. Even if I prefer the term community organizer, so which means that she not only pursues knowledge, but she tries to make it accessible to people who do not have the luxury of going to university. So that's her artist side. She makes sure her findings are of practical use for people who are on the ground, and she works with people who do the actual work in organizations and stuff. So I believe that she is an example of what a scholar should be, because there is no point in gathering knowledge if it doesn't serve anyone, really. I mean, I know some academics cannot do that because now it has been a very exploitative industry, but I've always believed in diverting power from the ivory tower. Knowledge shouldn't be contained in certain spaces. It should be made accessible and be useful for people. I'm not gonna lie, she is one of my favorite role models. She does everything I believe in, I want to do, and she actually inspired me for the way I conduct my own research, and I decided to propagate my knowledge. And her, as a Black Muslim woman who wears the hijab in a position of a full-time professorship in an American university, I think it needs to be celebrated. It is a career path I would have taken if academics were paid fairly, and if I had time for my family, and if it was not detrimental on my health. But even Professor Su'ad calls academia the plantation, because it is now a very exploitative industry, especially for people from ethnic, cultural, religious minorities. The book itself has a very simple premise. It is made from interviews of young Muslims in the Chicago area to explore the complexities of identities formed at the crossroads of Islam and hip-hop. The book explores, as she writes, different ways of being an American Muslim through ideas, through fashion, through social activism, in the hood, as she says, and the complex relationships with power, the power of the state, the power of social norms. It talks about how non-Black Muslims in America also draw their inspiration from Black American culture to build their identity, and in what way it challenges the racist norms or the ethnic and religious norms in the United States, and specifically within American Muslim communities. It is also a challenge to the idea that Muslims and Islam are foreign to American culture. What I liked about the book is that for an academic book, it is very, very unconventional. Let me read that to you. In the very, very first pages, she writes, "In the name of Allah, for the love of Muhammad, peace be upon him, to honor the ancestors, in celebration of my people." And this is, I think, one of the strengths of the book. She puts a lot of herself and her experiences in the book. If you've read or tried to read academic books, you know that the style, how it's written, it sounds usually very robotic. Lots of researchers, for example, would talk at the third person. So the author would say, the researcher considers X, Y, and Z. No, she talks at the first person. I, me, I have seen, I have observed, I have spoken to these people. The book revolves a lot around hip-hop. And the way it's written, at the end, you will see that not only there is a bibliography, so all the literary, all the references of written works, books and articles, but there is also a discography, which means references to all the albums, the tracks that she quotes and other people mention in the book to illustrate her points. And even if you don't know anything about hip-hop, this is really well explained, you know, the why and the how, the importance of things. I grew up listening to French hip-hop and rap, and I think me too, I consider the golden age of hip-hop and rap, especially in France, from the late 80s to the 90s, because it was a time where rap and hip-hop were not about displaying flashy things, business deals. It was not an industry. People would do this on the ground. And what mattered is the depth, the quality, and the meaning of the lyrics. So even if you don't listen to music, you can just read some rap and hip-hop lyrics from the 80s or the 90s. It always amazes me how people were so ahead of their time. I mean, they're just, you know, were really good observers and just put things into words, but it is pure poetry, the way it's written. So it's so powerful, it really hits you in the face. When you consider the social realities of nowadays, people already observed these kind of things like 30, 40 years ago. And some of them are so painfully true and so beautifully written that, you know, it makes me cry sometimes just reading some of the lyrics. So one can understand how hip-hop, especially in depraved areas, in people who do not have access to privilege, how it was a powerful cement and a powerful building block of life when people were neglected by the education system, the healthcare system, and so on. And people did not have access to religious knowledge as we have nowadays. All these artists were, I would say, a middle person between the religious knowledge, the religious wisdom, and people who did not have access to all these things. But remember, back in the 80s, in the 90s, there was not as much literature, especially written in English, that talks about Islam. So people would gain knowledge in a way and translate them through hip-hop and rap and so on. And I've learned things such as, you know, Nation of Islam. Some people would think whatever they want about Nation of Islam, but we cannot deny that the organization was pivotal, a key player in the development of Islam in the United States. And things I didn't know, for example, is that Nation of Islam already promoted a Tayyib lifestyle way before Tayyib became a thing. It's about a healthy lifestyle. It's about taking care of the animals and knowing, you know, where our food comes from. So they were like putting the emphasis on trying not to eat processed industrial food. If it's not grown somewhere, you don't eat it. So the book talks about fashion in the way, for example, how some people would dress in a Western style, but in a way to subvert the norms, what some people call black dandyism. But also it talks about people who make a lot of money and then turn their back on the community. But one of the key concepts of the book is in the title itself, Muslim cool. What does coolness mean in this universe? When Su'ad talks about Muslim coolness, this is not the social media cool that we use nowadays. It has nothing to do with desirability, something, you know, kind of privilege. Now being cool is a privilege that you build either on wealth, fame, power. But coolness in this realm, it means to be unashamedly oneself without caring about the judgment of others. Defy the system, defy the norms, not to conform like everyone does on social media. In terms of method, I think that this book is extremely rigorous. The theory is really solid. And one of the strengths of the book is the methodology she uses, which is going to probably upset a lot of old school scholars, because this is a long-term insider ethnography, which means that she builds her fieldwork, her data, her research upon years and years of familiarity with the people she interviews in the book, with the organizations she volunteers with in the book. And people are usually are a bit annoyed with insider ethnography because they say, you're being biased. If you are an insider doing research on your own people, you have a strong bias. The research is not going to be objective. To which lots of academics since have counter-argued that, first of all, if you want to do a fieldwork on black Muslims in Chicago, who's going to be able to build the trust within the community? Who's going to be able to understand what the references people make? Who's going to be able to understand the daily life and all the context of the fieldwork? Because when you had outsiders doing ethnography, this is what caused things like Orientalism. People understood the East, the Middle East, South Asia through the lens of modern post-industrial Eurocentric norms. And this is how people were able to make judgments such as, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism are backwards and, this. Because in truth, and this is the second point, no research is free from bias. No research is impossible for it to be completely objective. And I think, it is actually important for researchers to write about their position towards the research, the fieldwork, because the reader can then know, oh, maybe she's saying that because she's an insider. It actually helps for the reader to make a difference. So instead of pretending being objective, it's, I think, ethically and rigorously better to acknowledge your possible bias. And the second thing that can upset a lot of old school researchers is that she uses auto-ethnography, which means that she considers herself as part of the fieldwork, one of the respondents, which means that she uses her own life experiences to form the questions, to analyze what she sees around her, what people respond to. And again, this is not something which is out of the vacuum, because I strongly believe that any kind of research in the humanities, in arts, in the social sciences, it comes from questions that the researcher ask themselves. It comes from life experiences. And the only thing is, and until recently, people just used to hide it for the sake of, this objectivity, to pretend that they're completely non-involved in the research. But here she takes the opposite approach. She acknowledges that as a black Muslim woman, the hip-hop has played a huge role in her life. And she asked then the question, what did it bring for me? What did it bring to others? What did it, from a microscopic scale to a macroscopic scale? Instead of being an unidimensional book, this book has an incredible depth. It's a narrative style which is very, very easy to read, even if some of the things are a bit complex, but it's super easy to read because it's about people's lives. It's about her life, life of others, the questions they have. And the big, big, big strength of this book is, this book is alive. So here it is, whether you were an anthropology, sociology, or ethnography student and would like to have ideas about how do you conduct your research, I think this book is a great example. And of course, if you want to learn more about Blackness, Islam, hip-hop in the United States, this book is a cornerstone of the field. Thank you very much for your attention. And again, take care of each other and yourselves.